I know high school kids tend to be overscheduled these days, but this is just getting silly. How many fucking battles for the soul of humanity have the Phantom Thieves had to cram into their last couple of years of high school before they turn 18 and become, by the standards of anime games, over the hill? Surprised they even find the time to accidentally perv on each other in the bath. So Persona 5 Tactica represents Atlus's latest effort to hedge on finally committing to a fucking Persona 6 for Christ's sake, and I must say, officially marks the point that I got kinda sick of Persona 5 spin-offs, which is remarkable in itself because the fucking dancing game couldn't manage that. So once again, the Phantom Thieves, simultaneously the world's most extraneously large heist crew and the world's smallest cosplay convention, get sucked into the metaverse and go through a hideous, tortuous process that makes their noses disappear and inflates their heads to about twice normal size. But besides that, it's the usual routine: shoot a bunch of monster dickheads in order to make some dickheads in the real world less cranially penile, and if I sound dismissive, it's because I didn't get a sense that the plot was dealing with any themes or situations we haven't broadly encountered before in Persona 5 games. Even with the twist that this time the monster dickheads are projected from one specific dude's cognition, it all comes down to the same dickhead teacher and dickhead dad routines that the individual Phantom Thieves have already gone through, one way or another. Where it differs is that instead of fantasy heists, we're engaging in fantasy guerrilla warfare to make a better fit for the new combat system, which is where the real effort is on display, or at least what effort it takes to copy-paste the combat from Mario and Rabbids 2 and stretch the Phantom Thieves over it. Tokenly, it adds the usual Persona mechanic of fusing and equipping personas to develop a suite of elemental powers that exploit different elemental weaknesses, but the sticking point with that is the enemy don't have elemental weaknesses. Actually, tell a lie, they all have the same weakness to the element of being shot while out of cover. And how do you get them out of cover? I'm glad you asked, inquisitive voice in my head. You do literally anything to them that isn't a standard attack. You melee them, or burn them, or freeze them, or shock them, or hypnotize them, or nuclear them. And call me an ignorant Emperor's New Clothes non-seeing person, but it kinda seems like it doesn't matter a mildly chafed inner thigh what specific powers you have equipped. I don't mind that the combat's easy, that's Persona's whole appeal. It's the fun, easygoing branch of Shin Megami Tensei where all the waifus hang out. I mind that it's also boring, and that so much of the attached flappery is ultimately redundant. So where else does Persona's appeal lie for me? The dual world element? That's absent. You just go from one metaverse battle to the next, hanging around in the green room in between to skip through lengthy dialogue scenes and compete to see whose action pose sticks their bum out the furthest. The stylish menu design? I guess we still have that, although the menu organization is a lot worse. I don't understand why we have to go to one menu to buy guns, but then have to go to an entirely different menu under an entirely different subheading past 9 flashy animated transitions in order to sell our old guns. Really good music. Yeah, alright, you can have a tick there. Persona 5 Tactica is permitted to exist as long as I can't be asked to buy the soundtrack album. I think it was during the Third Kingdom that my boredom with the combat reached critical mass, and I decided it probably wouldn't make a splash in the scandal press if I were to just kick it in the head and watch the rest of the cutscenes on YouTube. After which I discovered I'd successfully predicted all the reveals and twists in the plot, including that at the very end it would turn out that the mastermind was a hitherto unintroduced corrupted faux benevolent god, and we'd defeat them with the power of friendship, but not that I have the power of prophecy. It was primarily my proficiency in Persona pattern perception. In summary, more like Persona Slackticker, am I right? Let's move on from being surprisingly disappointed by a familiar IP to being surprisingly impressed by an unfamiliar one. American Arcadia is a fairly short narrative indie game in which protagonist Trevor Hills, nebbish middle manager and boring twat, discovers that his entire life is a reality TV show being watched by the people outside the thinly disguised Disney World resort in which he dwells, and is forced to go on the run when he learns the powers that be are about to disappear him for not being interesting enough to watch. Certainly hits close to home for someone who makes a living on YouTube. American Arcadia is split between two protagonists and two gameplay styles, 2D cinematic platforming as Trevor and a first-person puzzle adventure thingy as the person on the outside trying to help him. Interesting, but some might say the game doesn't make the most of its dual gameplay concept. There's one section where you have to guide Trevor on your monitor while simultaneously bluffing through an awkward conversation with management, and I wish there'd been more of that crossover stuff. At all other times it just switches back and forth. Some might also say the plot's hardly original, occupying the precise midpoint between The Truman Show, The Matrix, Westworld, and Pleasantville. Some might also find it irritating that it does the Little Nightmares thing, where if you do anything but the precise sequence of actions intended by the narrative, then you get abruptly murdered like a horse with a suboptimal number of functioning legs. But on the other hand, actually, why did I like American Arcadia? Well, this is the thing, viewers. I wasn't sure I was liking American Asphyxia. The first-person bits occasionally descend into annoyingly obtuse sliding tile-adjacent puzzles, and meanwhile, the 2D gameplay features a lot of pushing boxes around, which is the narrative puzzle platformer equivalent of the inoffensive shade of pastel green used to paint the walls of mental hospitals. The very character-focused story was engaging enough, but the dialogue's a touch shaky at times. I'm getting a little bit sick of that thing Yuri Lowenthal always does when voicing nerdy characters. Deliver half his lines in an incredulous high-pitched shriek like a 50s housewife housewife noticing a mouse in the kitchen. But I'll tell you what it was that flipped my thumb around to an upward direction. American Arseburger probably has the most satisfying ending of any game I've played in quite a while. Obviously I won't spoil, but you know how films with PG ratings are allowed to say fuck precisely once? If that's also the case with video games, and if there were some kind of annual prize for best strategic use of your one permitted fuck, then American Auntie Nora would be my hot pick. Goes to show just how important a good ending can be in the grand scheme of things, as I said in my Yelp review for my local Asian massage parlour.